2, 3, and... קדוש אחד ישראל ברוך שמו אדוני.
Shalom and welcome. It's lovely to be back with you again on Friday, Answers for Our Time. You're joining Dr. Stephen Pidgeon and myself, Jessica Knock. And as always, it's a real pleasure to be with you today. On today's program, we've got two objectives. I just wanted to finish going through one or two videos possibly of the work that Dr. Pidgeon and Ross Broadstock had done last month whilst that he was visiting in Wales. There was extensive research done there, and obviously the program was dedicated on Tuesday to the sad and sudden passing of Ross, who is the founder of Britain's Hidden History. You know, it's not only for the fact that we're mourning the loss of a husband, of a friend, of a researcher, but the fact that these type of programs, it's important because for the times that we are in, we have to understand spiritually where we are. Now, in light of history, to me, this is how I measure history. We're in prophetic times right now, and I need to see how that is going to affect where we are, how we navigate these times that we live in. Saying that, I have seen for the last 2 years, and I think I said it on Tuesday or I said it on Friday, that from day one of going into lockdown and everything else, we knew that we had entered into prophetic times. And I have seen in my lifetime, your lifetime, how that narrative has changed and how we're supposed to subject to ourselves to what is told we're supposed to do, away from the truth. We're given a different narrative. We have witnessed institutions that we would otherwise trust tell us which is not the case, which we should not adhere to, but they're telling us it's in our best interest. They're saying it from a medical point of view and from a spiritual point of view. And so there is a company of people that have come out and stood out against this and realizing, no, this is not so. There is more to this. And for that reason, that is where I look at history, or the link of history, to see how things have been corrupted, how have they been changed through time. You know, on our Friday program last week, we were looking at the sacred names, the correct names of God, and how that emerged. And it was before the Jesuits and the Romans and the Catholics changed it. All the way back, Stephen showed us that this has been going on from the time that it was written, that it was inspired, that it came about first with the Babylonians, then the Masoretes, from the Masoretes moving into the Jesuits, the Catholic Church. Everywhere, you know, you can see in so many different ways how things have been changed, how things have been hindered, how things have been obstructed and kept away. And so that makes me see that we have to test everything for ourselves, and we have to be all the time like the Berean Jew, and testing to see what is true, being noble in that act, because that's what they were known for. So today what we're going to do, as I said, is watch one video which is based on research that Dr. Pidgeon has done with Ross, but we're actually going to start, which was the whole emphasis of these programs from day one, Sefer, Answer for Our Times. So we're going to look at the construction of Sefer. We're going to understand from Dr. P how this came about, his own passion, what brought this into birth, why it came into being, the translation, the Hebrew that it's written in, why it's written in that way. We're going to focus on those books, and also the hidden, the forgotten books. That's really important to me, again, because it comes back to understanding these times. And I can see, and there's so much more about it, in fact, but for me, that's the important, that's the intriguing, that's the enticing part of seeing these books, because it gives jigsaw pieces that are otherwise unanswered in what has come about and they're saying this is the authoritative book. Now, I'm not disputing against who says what is authority and is not authority, but I see that there is a conspiracy and a reason why certain things were omitted out. For instance, I just want to bring this one thing to you, and then we're going to invite Dr. P on. So I'm reading from Romans 13. Now, this is the New International Version, and listen to what it says here. And this is why it's so important. Submission to governing authorities. Let everyone be subjected to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God. Consequently, whoever rebels against the authority is rebelling against what God has instituted, and those who do so will bring judgment on themselves. Okay, so that's up to verse 3. Now let's go to the Sefer and read the same thing. So that's Romans 13, verses 1 to 3. Let every soul be subject unto the higher powers. Big difference there from higher powers to where it says governing powers. For there is no power but of Elohim. The powers that be are ordained of Elohim. Whosoever therefore resists the power, resists the audience of Elohim, and they that resist shall receive to themselves damnation. So you see, there's a big difference there. What's been taken away from us is to worship Elohim. And they're telling us, rather than the higher power, which is Elohim, worship the governing authority. Boy, have we been in that position, having to fight that battle for the last nearly 3 years. And that's what I object to. And that's why I stand and I look at everything. I want you to look at the technique in the way that Stephen goes through the programs that we do. He looks at the signs, he looks at the symbology. He's been blessed to understand so many different levels of Hebrew, but it gives him a depth into understanding what is actually being said, what is actually going on. And we need to apply that into every area of our spirituality and our walk so that we can stand strong. So, you know, in everything that we do with these programs, my marker is, how is it going to help me navigate these times? How is it going to make me work out my salvation in fear and trembling? For me, the most important things are to preserve the names, the correct names, to be sealed with those names, and to be sealed and protect the mark, the seal in our lives, and not in any way come into, be forced, coerced into the mark of the beast. And so we're back into the whole purpose of why we started these programs, you know, and I've just shared for you from my personal heart. In Acts 4:18 to 20, it says, and they called him, and this is in line with the 2 other scriptures, and they called him and commanded them not to speak nor teach in the name of Yahushua. But Kepha and Jonathan, and that's Paul and Jonathan, answered and said unto them, whether it be right in the sight of Elohim to hearken unto you more than to Elohim, judge ye. That means judge me, for we cannot but speak the things that we have seen and heard. So what I'm saying is, these programs are coming back to the essence, because we need to know how to authenticate the word, how to stand and be expositors of the word correctly, how to defy corruption, how to defy and stand and expose what has been hidden, and be strong in our valor to say, we know what we know. And these books, for instance, they should be considered as part of the scripture. Whilst they're not, we can see why they are, and we're going to stand as that new company and be empowered to go forward and see the word in these days come forth. So we are the ambassadors of the word, and that's my heart. I'm speaking to people that are just coming new into Torah, coming new into these areas, coming as an assembly together, and you can't actually authenticate or verbalize where you are, but there's bits and bobs that are coming. You're coming through those crevices, and you're saying in something like the ministry that the Sefer offers, that it's beginning to give answers in ways that you couldn't understand before. But we've got a long way to go, and first and foremost, it is always about worship to a sovereign Yahuwah, to a sovereign El, and having him in our lives so strongly that he is centered, and from that we worship in spirit and truth Yahushua, and we live with kingdom impact through the Ruach HaKodesh. So with that, now I have the pleasure of inviting Dr. Pidgeon It's wonderful to have you, Stephen, as usual. Thank you. It's so great to have you today.
Great to be here, Jesse. Thank you. And thank you for that introduction. Yeah, there's much to discuss when you talk about when we talk about this, the artifacts that we were looking through,
Yeah.
and partly what we were trying to discover. Now, one of our friends, Malcolm David.
Yes.
I was speaking with Malcolm today, and we were talking about something in particular. And we were talking about Acts chapter 29.
Really?
Yeah, no, Acts chapter 29 is very interesting because in Acts chapter 29, you have something here that does not exist in any other text. And I need to give a little bit of background on Acts chapter 29 so you know what we're talking about. Most people's scripture ends with Acts chapter 28.
Yes.
And Acts chapter 28 is unusual because it does not end with the word amen, right? It just kind of abruptly terminates. Acts 28, it reads here at the end, and Paul dwelt 2 years in his own hired house, received all that came in unto him, preaching the kingdom of Elohim and teaching those things which concern Adonai Yahushua HaMashiach with all confidence, no man forbidding him. End of book. Now, the reason why the book was terminated there had to do with the Roman Church ending the book there.
Right.
Because the Roman Church wanted to perpetuate the myth that Paul was beheaded by Nero in Rome. Well, this is simply not true. And we discovered corroboration for that when we were looking through the bookstores in Norwich. We came on a set, The Journeys of Paul, in 2 books, Volume 1 and Volume 2, printed in 1857. And they indicated their research showed in the Roman record that, in fact, Paul was acquitted in 61 AD and that he left and he went to Spain. And in Spain, he did, in fact, ordain a number of prophets.
Right.
And a number of bishops. Now, in Acts 29, interestingly enough, it begins this way. And Paul, full of the blessings of Mashiach and abounding in the Ruach HaKodesh, departed out of Rome, determining to go into Spain, for he had a long time purposed to journey thitherward, and was minded also to go from thence into Britain. Now, this becomes an extremely important point. And first of all, in the book of Romans, he says he intends to go to Spain. And there is a fragment upon which we relied called the Moratorian fragment. The Moratorian fragment. This is a fragment that was reputed to have been written in the late 400s, but the writing evidence is Latin of a form in the late 500s. And it declares for the first time in writing the order of the 27 books of the New Testament.
Wow.
The very first time that there is documented evidence anywhere at any level of the order of books in the New Testament. And in this Moratorian fragment, it tells us that Paul went to Spain. Well, okay, Paul intended to go to Spain. Then the Moratorian fragment, a rather authoritarian fragment, giving us the list of the New Testament, indicates he went to Spain. There's additional Roman record that says he went to Spain, and the Spanish record has him appointing bishops. Now, it's interesting when he goes into Britain, because when he got to Britain, it says that he landed, he talks about going into Spain. He preached mightily in Spain. Great multitudes believed and were converted. They perceived he was an apostle sent by Elohim. And he departed out of Spain, Paul and his company, finding a ship in Amorica. Okay, now, Amorica is a Welsh word.
Is it?
Yeah, it's a Welsh word. It means the land over the sea, Amorica. And this is where we get the name America for both North and South America. It comes from a Welsh word. It doesn't come from Americus Vespucci, which is Italian BS, bubulum stircus, as they say in the Latin. It's Italian bubulum stircus. Oh, that came from Americus Vespucci. Absolute baloney. the word came from Armorica, which was a Welsh word meaning the land over the sea, and they used the term to describe both Gaul and Portugal and Spain, and the Basque area of Spain and Western France, and they also used it to describe North America.
Ah, so interesting.
The Welsh were in North America in the 6th century.
Wow.
This is the legend of Madoc, and Madoc, who was a prince under the time of Arthur II, King Arthur. And this story goes into something that both Ross and I talked about. We did research on King Arthur when we were in Wales. But here's the thing. They sailed into Britain. They went therein, passing to the south coast, and they reached a port called Raphinus. Okay, now, can we do a little share here?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to see if I can share a screen here.
Mm-hmm,
What I want to do is I want to share Google Earth here. Let me see if you can you pull that up, Jesse? Can you get that?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I don't know if you can see my cursor, not my mouse.
Yes.
Okay. So when we're talking about this, let's pull out here just a little bit. And you can see now there's some very interesting things that go on here. Okay. One is that we see that what? Let's reload here just a moment. One that we see here in this context is we can see these locations here as soon as we get Google Earth to reload here. It's taking time. Now you can see here, this is very good because you can see that here in Spain, here's Spain here.
Yeah.
This area over here along this coast was called Lusitania.
Right. So that's Lisbon. I can't see the top one. So that's Lusitania previously.
Yeah, that's Lusitania previously, yes. Now, what happened is that Galathus, who was the son of Zarak, Galathus left out of Athens and traveled back into Egypt and across this land here through Tunisia and so forth, and then crossed here into Spain and along this coast. Now, along this coast, they decided to create a port city. And the port city was called the Port of Galathus, or Portugal. Okay. Now, the Gauls lived here in Portugal and all along the northern coast of France here, what they call the Basques people, and all along the western coast of France, and in particular, up here into an area that's called Brittany. Okay. Now, this area up here, Guernsey and Guernsey are English-speaking islands.
Yes.
Okay. This area here was known as Brittany, and these people speak or spoke Welsh just as these people did and these people did.
Wow. Across the shore. Wow.
Yeah, these people, this group of people here, and here were all one group of people.
Really?
So set sail, and he set sail, and he comes through here, and he ends up coming to this. He comes to this port that's called Raphinus. Well, Raphinus is actually the ancient Raphinus was right here, this coast at Sandwich.
Wow.
And so he came in here into Sandwich Bay, right? And he probably came up this river to some degree, and they ported here, in which would be ancient Raphinus. Now, from here, he traveled and preached. Then it says here he went. Now, when it was noised that the apostle had landed on the coast, great multitudes of the inhabitants met him and treated Paul courteously, and he entered in at the east gate of their city and lodged in the house of an Ivri and one of his own nation. And on the morrow he came and stood upon Mount Lud, and the people thronged at the gate. Well, of course, we know Mount Lud,
London,
has a particular location. Now, this is of course the city of London.
Yeah.
and here's Westminster and so forth.
Yeah.
But we need to go up here to,
St. Paul's.
okay, we need to come up to St. Paul's Church. And St. Paul's Church, I just need to find it here. London
Yeah.
School of Economics. Now, the London School of Economics, this is where Broadstock went to school.
That's right. Yeah.
London Economics. Here we go, City of London. And we'll jump in here a little bit. And we're going to find that in the City of London, the main hallmark here is right here. This is St. Paul's
right.
Church.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And it sits on a hill. And this road right here, right in the face of this church right here,
Yeah.
This road is called Ludgate. Ludgate.
Hey, that's Ludgate. Mm.
Because this spot here is the most likely spot where Paul preached. And it says, on the morrow he came and stood on Mount Lud, and the people thronged at the gate, at Ludgate, and assembled in the broad way, that would be this, and he preached Mashiach unto them, and many believed the word and the testimony of Yahusha.
Mm.
Right? And at evening, the Ruach HaKodesh fell upon Paul, and he prophesied, saying, behold, in the last days, Yahuwah Shalom shall dwell in the cities, and the inhabitants thereof shall be numbered. And in the seventh numbering of the people, their eyes shall be opened, and the glory of their inheritance shall shine forth before them, and nations shall come up to worship on the mount that testifies to the patience and long suffering of the servant of Yahweh. Well, that would be St. Paul's. And in the latter days, new tidings of the Besorah, the gospel, shall issue forth out of Jerusalem, and the hearts of the people shall rejoice, and behold, fountains shall be opened, and there shall be no more plague. In those days there shall be wars and rumors of wars, and a king shall rise up, and his sword shall be for the healing of the nations, and his peacemaking shall abide, and the glory of his kingdom a wonder among princes. Well, isn't that fascinating?
It is. It is. Wow. That is that last part you were reading is from the Sefer Acts.
Yes, it's from Acts chapter 29.
29. Wow. When you went to St. Paul's, was there anyone that you could have a conversation with? Because I'd be interested to hear them say, well, we're St. Paul's and you've brought this information, and they probably heard of this before. Did you engage in any conversation like that with anyone? With that?
I did. Actually, I did. But actually, the conversation was a bit limited. And so when we came inside the building, I began making inquiry of the staff that worked there, who knows about Lud Hill.
Yeah.
And everybody kept pointing me to the same guy. You need to go down to the crypt and talk to this guy that's over by the bookstore. Okay. He knows. And so we eventually made our way down into the crypt. And of course, in the crypt, they have the exalted tomb of the Duke of Wellington. Wellington. Wellington, as you know, was an Irish fellow. Mm. And this Irish fellow is the one who defeated Napoleon at Waterloo and was the only Irishman to ever hold the position of prime minister in Britain. At least until Liz Truss got there. No, I'm just kidding. Anyway, but at any rate, he was an Irishman that held the position of prime minister in Britain, having defeated Napoleon and having saved the common law. I mean, the Duke of Wellington, what did he save? He saved the common law, because Napoleon replaced the common law of Europe with the Napoleonic Code. And to this day, all of Europe, including Russia, is premised upon Napoleonic Code, right? Yeah. Now, the prophecy that Stuart is putting up right now, this is the prophecy that came upon Paul. We're in such a time as this right now, Jesse. We're in such a time as this, because guess what? Now, I'm going to go back to Acts 29. Mm-hmm. Acts 29, the reason Acts 29 was excised from Scripture is because it did not fit Rome's narrative that Paul died in Rome. Because the Roman cross asserts three things. One, this is the execution by the means of execution by which we executed the Son of God, right? Mm. Second, This is the means of execution upside down that we use to execute the top apostle, Peter. Third, we executed the second top apostle, Paul, by beheading him in Rome. All of these things are then illustrated in the cross of Rome, demonstrating the power of Rome to be above the Son of God, the power of Rome to be above the top of Peter, the top apostle Peter, to be above the top apostle Paul. That's the assertion of Rome.
Yes.
Well, I hate to break the news to Rome. Paul did not die in Rome, wasn't beheaded in Rome. He was acquitted in Rome, and he went on to establish the church in Spain and also to appoint a bishop in London at Mount Lud, where the Church of St. Paul is to this day, Mount Lud. Now, so this particular version of the Acts 29 was not discovered until the reign of Louis XVI in France, because Louis XVI, bearing in mind that the Catholic Church had complete control of Scripture until the collapse of Constantinople in 1453. Okay?
Right.
The Greek-speaking world had a different set of scriptures. They had a different understanding. And from the Great Schism, which happened in the early 11th century, the Catholics did not read Orthodox texts. They did not read the Greek. They read the Latin. And if you look in Britain's history, you will see that the Book of Kells, about 675 AD, written at the Isle of Iona, it's in Latin. When you look at the gospel, the earliest gospel, St. Anne's gospel, that was sequestered, actually her New Testament, sequestered at the chapel in the Edinburgh Castle. This is 1153, written in Latin. Virtually all of the doctrine in the British Isles was written in Latin. And the dominant thrust of Catholicism throughout Western Europe was done in Latin, and the Greek was rejected.
Right.
So the Greek manuscript, on the other hand, is the manuscript that would be used in Eastern Orthodoxy. And if you recall, the Greek language is written in Cyrillic. And so we see that when the torch passed from the Byzantium torch passed from the Byzantine Empire, which was ruled by the city of Constantinople, that torch passed to the city of Moscow.
Oh, really?
And that torch passed to the city of Moscow via the marriage of Zoe Paleolog. Now, Zoe Paleolog was the last princess, if you will, of the Byzantine Empire. She was the daughter of the last king of Byzantium, who died after the collapse of Constantinople in 1453. She was taken into Rome and was trained thereafter in Catholicism. And she was instructed by the Vatican to go into Moscow and to marry the Tsar, Ivan III, and to convert him to Roman Catholicism. Well, she went to Moscow, met Ivan III, and promptly converted back to Orthodoxy and rejected Rome outright and became a Russian-speaking woman and represented the secession from Constantinople, the Byzantine Empire, the second Rome, into Moscow, the third Rome. And if you recall, the Russian language is in Cyrillic. It's in Cyrillic. It's a form of the Greek. And the Russian language has the same kind of semantics that does the Greek language, the same kind of declensions and the verbs, the same kind of tenses that they use, whether it's the genitive or the accusative or whatever it may be, interrogative. All of these cases that are consistent in Greek are also consistent in Russian. And so the Russian, the Eastern Orthodoxy has a different set of traditions and has a different set of premises upon which they base their scripture. For instance, the Eastern Orthodox New Testament is in a completely different order than the Western New Testament. The Western New Testament exalts Paul and delegates Peter, James, and Jude to the back half of the book.
Right.
Whereas this is not the case. Paul is the very last part of the Eastern Orthodox New Testament. So the manuscripts that were retained in Constantinople, there were thousands of manuscripts of the New Testament at Constantinople, they escaped only after the collapse of Constantinople in 1453. And some of these manuscripts worked their way up into the Netherlands. And this is where Desiderius Erasmus would get his hands on these manuscripts and begin to compile a brand new text of the New Testament outside the reach of the Roman Church. The Roman Church had notoriously stated that in their Codex Vaticanus and in their Vulgate, that they had the right to overrule Scripture and to change Scripture to comport with Catholic doctrine. This is openly stated.
Yes. Yeah.
So the Codex Vaticanus and the Vulgate were corrupted to allow things like statues and engraved images, right? Because they have them everywhere.
Yeah.
And of course, the engraved image was the means by which Rome would assert its authority. Look at our gigantic building with all of these statues of all the important people. Don't you want to be an important person who's memorialized in a statue? Look, you can see it all over Britain, in all the old Catholic edifices. What do you see? Yeah. You see statue on statue on statue on statue on statue on statue on statue. This is forbidden, absolutely verboten by the second commandment. You cannot make engraved images and you cannot bow down and worship them. And yet Catholicism had them everywhere.
Yeah, you're right. And now they're made out as the most sacred places when you've just brought those points across. So, and with your research that you were doing, some of the videos that we've watched and will continue to watch, both you and Roshi were saying, unless Rome can take credit for it, they're not interested. They want to show that they have the stamp, they have the seal. So that's sort of what you're saying here, really, as well.
Sure. And when you study Western history, but second century mentions Paul's work in Spain gives few of the details. Generation later, 8200 Tertullian mentions the extremities of Spain. And it's not just Tertullian. The record is really quite replete of him appointing bishops in Sevilla, appointing bishops in Cordoba. I mean, he was in Andalusia, right? This area called Andalusia, which is where he established the faith. Very early on. We're talking 61 A.D.
Yeah.
And his trip into Britain was 61, 62 AD. It was right in that neck of the woods. It could have been as late as 63 AD, but it was right in that time period.
Yeah.
And so what we see here is that with the Moratorian fragment, so Louis XVI is now very interested in what's going on because, Desiderius Erasmus has come in with a new Textus Receptus. And the Textus Receptus that was developed by Desiderius Erasmus was then followed up with what's called the Beza Textus Receptus and ultimately the Stephanus Textus Receptus, which was widely accepted by Miles Coverdale, widely accepted by John Calvin, widely accepted by the KJV interpreters as being as close to dispositive a text as we could get in the Greek. However, they did not have access to the best copies of the New Testament. So Louis XVI, the king who would be beheaded in France in 1789, instructed Sonini. He said, I want you to go to Istanbul, then called Istanbul, and I want you to go find the best possible copies of the New Testament you can. So Sonini travels and he goes to the Sultan, whose name was Ahmed, and he says, tell me, Ahmed, where do I find the best manuscripts? And Ahmed says, I know where all the best manuscripts are. Come on, let me take you. And he takes him into the Red Mosque, formerly the Hagia Sophia, which was the most important church in all of Christendom, much more important than the Vatican. It was the most important church in Christendom until it fell in 1453 and had been converted into a mosque called the Red Mosque. It still stands today.
Right.
And in the basement of this Red Mosque, in the crypts, were found thousands of manuscripts. So Sonini is going through the manuscripts and he finds the book of Acts complete with the chapter 29. So he leaves Istanbul and returns to Paris. When he gets to Paris, the king is being beheaded. So he doesn't even want to pretend he knows the king. And so he just keeps right on moving. And he goes, where would you go if you need to sequester a manuscript for safekeeping? Well, the answer was then what the answer is today, Ireland. because Ireland is the literary capital of the world.
Yeah, you
Because
said that
the
before.
Irish culture is such that reveres manuscripts and takes care of those manuscripts.
Right.
They have always been trustworthy in maintaining the manuscripts. Even in the ancient abbeys that Henry VIII burned to the ground, had manuscripts that had been entrusted to the Irish. And so he shows up in Ireland, and this Irish family says, we will take the manuscript and we will hold it for you. Well, they held it for him for almost 100 years before it was finally rediscovered and translated into English. And what they find when they translate it into English is the 29th chapter of the book of Acts.
Who translated it? Did that first translation? Do you know?
I have it in the preface with the person who did the translation. I don't have his name right here.
This is fascinating, Stephen, because you're going back further than what we've had knowledge to. You're giving a chronology basically further than what we're exposed to in the Sefer for many of us for the first time. So this is absolutely fascinating, and we just want more to this. That's why I was asking if you knew. Please carry on, but later tell us if you're going to be actually writing this all down in a blog or a book or something, because it's something, there's too much detail here, but we need to know this. We need to carry it and be able to say it as you are. So
I will have to set this forth, because I mean, it does become a very important aspect of what happened with Sonini, what happened with the manuscript, how the manuscript got out. And then the question becomes, okay, well, since the manuscript was unknown, it was unknown to Miles Coverdale, it was unknown to John Calvin, it was unknown to Francis Bacon and the KJV interpreters, it was even unknown to E.W. Bullinger. Right? This manuscript did not see the light of day until the latter part of the 19th century. So who had it?
Yeah.
Translated by C.S. Sonini from an original Greek manuscript found in the archives of Constantinople, presented him by Sultan Abdoul Achmet while visiting Constantinople. There we go. Thank you for putting that up. Yeah. And so you can see that Sonini, that once we have this translation now, all of a sudden this document is available. Now people say, well, you can't possibly print that. We're not going to allow you to print it. You can't do this. Well, who was making these the decisions? Well, let's take a look here. First of all, we know the Westcott and Hort text was developed before the Sonini manuscript was made public. And the Westcott and Hort script, which you were talking about the NIV, and you were talking about how badly Romans 13 is presented in the NIV. Well, the NIV is predicated upon Westcott and Hort. Westcott and Hort used a notorious forgery for their New Testament called the Codex Sinaiticus. The Codex Sinaiticus was written by a guy named Constantine Simonides. He published in the Manchester Guardian 3 years in a row after the Codex was found. And he said, I wrote it. I was writing it for the Tsar in Greek. I did a lousy job. That's why I threw it in the trash. That's why you found it in a trash can with papers removed that the monks were using to start fires. But Tichborne, who was a junior amateur archaeologist, oh no, this is the oldest codex in the world. And Westcott and Hort, two non-believers, professors at Cambridge, said, we can do something with that. And they took the Codex Sinaiticus and used it to create their received text, and that they claimed categorically was limited to 66 books, that they had proof from the Council of Laodicea in 385 AD that there were only 66 books in the Bible. Well, very interesting, Westcott and Hort, because of the 19 known copies of the minutes from the Council of Laodicea in 385 AD, only one, the one in your possession, has this last canon that says there's 66 books in the Bible. Only one. It was a forged document. So they had forged minutes from the Council of Laodicea using a forged New Testament called the Codex Sinaiticus. Wow. And for their Old Testament, guess what they used? Codex Vaticanus, the corrupted Roman text. This is the foundational document for the NIV. This is the foundational document for the ESV. This is the foundational document for the NKJV. This is the foundational document for the American Standard Version and the Revised American Standard Bible, the RASB. This is the foundational document. the forged Codex Sinaiticus, and the corrupted Codex Vaticanus. This is the Bible that your pastor stands up in your evangelical church and tells you is the inerrant word of God.
Absolutely. That's I'm feeling that fury that you just verbalized. Absolutely, Stephen. How much have we been bluffed? How much do we not know?
Yeah,
You know.
well, we've been bluffed a lot. And guess what? The Codex Sinaiticus and all this that was being relied upon by Westcott and Hort was before the revealing of Sonini's manuscript in Acts 29. Okay?
Yeah.
So now I'm going to go back to this prophecy that's in Acts 29 because this is a critical prophecy. Listen to this. And at evening, the Ruach HaKodesh fell upon Paul, and he prophesied. Now, so this is going to be the evening he's standing at Mount Lud, where St. Paul's Cathedral is, and he prophesied, saying, "Behold, in the last days." Okay, so what time is he talking about here with this prophecy? He's talking about right now.
Yep, right. Thank you, Stephen. Yeah.
Behold, in the last days, Yahweh Shalom, the peace of Yahweh, shall dwell in the cities, and the inhabitants thereof shall be numbered. Okay, so number. All right. And in the seventh numbering. So when did they take a census in Britain?
When do they take censuses? The census. It's every several years, 7 years? Oh gosh,
Every
I can't remember now.
10 years.
10 years, okay.
Every 10 years. Okay. And the inhabitants shall be numbered. And in the seventh numbering, the census of the people, their eyes shall be opened. The seventh numbering. The seventh census from what? The date of the Queen's coronation. So this is predicting the 70th Jubilee.
Really?
2022.
Yeah, we had that earlier, right.
And in the seventh numbering of the people, their eyes shall be opened, and the glory of their inheritance shall shine forth before them. This is happening right now. Right now.
Yeah. At the evening, go on, sorry.
And the nation shall come up to worship on the mount that testifies the patience and long suffering of a servant of Yahweh. What mount would that be? Mount Lud at the church called St. Paul's.
It's exciting.
In the new days, in the latter days, new tidings of the Besserah shall issue forth out of Jerusalem. New tidings of the good news shall issue forth out of Jerusalem, and the hearts of the people shall rejoice, and behold, fountains shall be opened, and there shall be no more plagues. What has been going on in Britain since 2020?
Yeah.
The plague.
The plagues, yeah.
There shall be no more plague. In those days there shall be wars and rumors of wars. That's what's going on right now.
Yeah.
And a king shall rise up. Not a queen, a king shall rise up.
Really? Wow, so we're talking just last month, 1 month. You put it into that context.
And his sword shall be for the healing of the nations, and his peacemaking shall abide, and the glory of his kingdom a wonder among princes. Okay, so I guess I'm going to prophesy this and say this today because it's an important thing. I don't know that Charles III is the king that's prophesied here. I don't know that. But this is the year for this prophecy right here. Now, I want to talk about this because there is a great deal of discussion that has recently been published about Charles III being, in fact, the Antichrist, being the beast that is established in Revelation 13, that his coat of arms qualifies as the beast symbology, right? And that he is going to rise up and proclaim himself what? The healer of the nations, right? The healer of the nations. And the glory of his kingdom shall be a wonder among princes. His peacemaking shall abide. Well, I'm just going to throw this out to everybody right now. There's several things that are happening here. Number one, we know that there's chaos in London right now, right? This whole business of Liz Truss being elected, which I knew was foolishness from the day they started it. I couldn't believe they brought Liz Truss in to be the prime minister. She
Yeah.
was uniquely unqualified.
Yeah.
And as Maria Zakharova, the spokesperson for the Kremlin, said, she was catastrophically illiterate. Well, that's a great way to put it. She was catastrophically illiterate. She couldn't tell the Baltic Sea from the Black Sea. Okay. I don't think she could find Ukraine on a map. And yet she was willing to say, we're willing to nuke Russia. She said, I'm willing to push the button to nuke Russia. That's not peacemaking, and it's certainly not diplomacy. And she was very reckless with her tongue, and her tongue, not only did it put her ship aground, but it sunk her own ship. Her tongue caused her ship to go right into the rocks and sink.
Yeah.
And it sunk in short order. Now, I was walking by 10 Downing Street, when we were walking, when we were walking through London.
Yeah.
We came upon 10 Downing Street. Hey, I was willing to, all she had to do was ask me and I would have helped. But guess what? She made so many mistakes initially that she could not repair the mistakes. And ultimately, she was hiding behind her desk, as they put it, hiding behind her desk to avoid the media responsibility for the things she had said, because her reckless tongue had sunk the ship of state. Now, Charles III is in a very unique position. And the prime minister's leadership, now this was a big issue that came up during the time of Elizabeth II. That did Elizabeth II have the authority as the monarch to overrule and to otherwise set in place correct policies for the United Kingdom? And the answer is historically, yes, she did. She would not exercise that authority ever, but she did have that authority, and there's precedent for it. In fact, even George VI exercised some of that authority. Now we're at a time right now where Europe is being destroyed from absolutely horrid leadership, including EU leadership, which is just a disaster. We know that the United States is being destroyed, Canada is being destroyed, and we're on the verge of having a world completely changed and controlled by the Communist Chinese Party. So with that being the case, we have to ask ourselves the question, what can be done? Is Charles the peacemaker that will bring this nonsense to an end? Now, he could be. And if it's not Charles, it's possible that it may be William, depending on what Charles's health is. But the way it stands right now, Charles could easily come forward and say, as the leader of 72 nations, we're not doing this anymore. That these people who are doing this nonsense in the United States, the Biden administration, dumping money and arms into Ukraine, causing the Germans to dump money and arms into Ukraine, causing the Poles to dump everything they have into Ukraine, this foolishness needs to come to an end. And he could do it by simply saying, we are terminating our support of Ukraine any further in this war, period. We're not going to do any further. We're not putting anything into Ukraine any further.
Yeah.
We are instead going to take a look at the resolute issues of Europe concerning the EU fundamentally. We do not believe that NATO has a place in this world any further, and that whatever alliances and allegiances were put together for the purposes of restructuring and solidifying Europe have to be completely rethought out. NATO needs to be discontinued and no longer funded. And we're going to arrive at peace with Russia in Ukraine, period. The death is going to stop. Because right now, the people that are about to die in Ukraine are these poor Ukrainians who have been drafted, pushed up to the front, and there's Nazis standing behind them that say, if you retreat, we're going to kill you. So these are the young people that are about to die in what is going to be an absolute onslaught of Russian munitions that are about to come down in Kherson that are going to be absolutely phenomenal. They're going to destroy everything that is left of the NATO mercenaries Those are mostly Poles, but there are British troops there.
Mhm.
And there are American troops in
Yeah.
Kyrgyzstan.
Yeah.
Okay. And they're going to be completely destroyed when this Russian hammer comes down. And this hammer is, I mean, we're hours away from this happening.
Mm.
But Charles could interrupt this and say, you know what? We're not doing this anymore. And he could instruct the British Foreign Office, a Foreign Office that
Right.
this, all of this exacerbation was caused by who was in the Foreign Office at the time causing this?
Trust.
Liz Truss.
Yeah.
Liz Truss.
So you were saying his mother had the power but never executed the power. He has the power. He could execute the power.
He could do this. He could stand up and say, as the king, I am instructing the British people that we will no longer be members of NATO organization. We will no longer support the war effort in Ukraine. As Ukraine is none of our business, which it really isn't. And if he were to do such a thing like that, he would herald peace immediately in Europe. And by heralding peace immediately in Europe, guess what? German homes are heated again. German industry takes up again. British homes are heated again. British industry takes up again. Employment takes up again. The labor strife goes away. All of these things happen, and they happen in very short order. Now, the question is whether or not he'll do this. Well, the prophecy here in the book of Acts, which, by the way, I had no idea I was going to be talking about this prophecy here today.
Right.
No
Okay.
idea. Absolutely no idea that we were going to be talking about this, but here we are.
Yeah.
With this prophecy being here and this prophecy being at St. Paul's. And again, you know, when you go through St. Paul's, it's very interesting because there is no discussion in St. Paul's of George VI. There's no discussion. You go from George V to Elizabeth II. There's no discussion of George VI. However, when you look at the coronation of Elizabeth II at St. Paul's or the coronation of George V at St. Paul's, you see these massive things that took place at St. Paul's. Huge. I mean, the crowd's lining all the way up to Ludgate, you know, thronging around the exterior of the building and so on and so forth. And I'm not trying to herald Charles III as anything significant. I'm just saying that there's a prophecy here that indicates that a king is going to rise. That the king is going to rise. Now, see, Charles doing the coronation at Westminster Abbey, in my opinion, is an error. Not at Westminster Abbey. It should be at St. Paul's, not at Westminster Abbey. Look, I'm just telling this just my opinions, okay? They don't amount to much, but I'm just saying that it should not be at Westminster Abbey. Westminster Abbey is where you have funerals and weddings. The coronation should be at St. Paul's at Ludgate. Now,
right. For out of interest, you know more than me, though this is in my country. Where have the previous coronations taken place? Has it been at the Abbey or has it been St. Paul's?
It's been at St. Paul's.
So what? Because he's divorced, they haven't.
You should go and look at the photos. There's photos from the coronation of George V at St. Paul's, and the throng that was at the exterior of the building. The amount of people that were there, it was just unbelievable. I mean,
I've seen the footage. Yeah, black and white footage. I remember seeing it so much. I just didn't place where it was. Would that be because he's divorced? Is that why they've downgraded, or is that nothing to do with?
Well, I mean, look, there's discussion that Charles has converted to Islam, and that he is he claims to be the head of the Islamic Church, claims to be the head of the Protestant Church, et cetera, et cetera. This is why his oath, he's trying to change the oath over to saying the protector of the faiths, plural, right? Which, of course, is allegedly going to be anathema to the Scots. However, I mean, the moral authority of the Scots is just about shot, right? I mean, it's just about shot. I mean, here we were at Holyrood, which is down at the end of the Royal Mile in Edinburgh. Okay, Holyrood is where the Scottish Parliament meets. And in front of the Scottish Parliament, they couldn't put up enough flags, right? They are just like the woman at the well who has many husbands, and the husband they're currently with, the man they're currently with is not their husband. You know, they had the EU flag up. They had the Scottish flag up. They had, I don't think they had the LGBT flag up, but I think the only reason is because they forgot to put it up that day. They had all kinds of flags up. Oh yeah, we're not part of, we're not part of the UK. We're part of the EU. We're part of this. We're part of that. We're part of the other thing. Well, which God do you worship? Right? Who
Mm,
is your Elohim, Scotland? I can tell you, Scotland, who was so adamant about, gee, we have to be the Scottish Rite Presbyterians, and that we're demanding the rise of Oliver Cromwell, and we're going to demand the democracy, and we're going to demand all the Scottish participation because we are the ardent proponents of the faith. You're not the ardent proponents of the faith anymore.
mm,
You're not there. You've got Masonic halls littered all over the place. You've got churches that have absolutely no grounding whatsoever in the true faith. And where's your real churches? And why aren't they thriving? Why are they lost in the dark? Because it's become a secular, when you want to talk about secular, let's talk about Glasgow for a minute.
mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember from your photos, not only secular, but how pagan, how that it's just full of wizardry, witchcraft, isn't it? That it's blatant as well.
Well, it's not just the witchcraft, it's full of criminality. I mean, it's like, okay, let's bring the banks up here so we've got less controls so we can, do all kinds of crazy banking practices. And those crazy banking practices will be followed by crazy social practices on the ground. So it is, shall we say, a highly immoral city.
Yeah.
You can sense it when you're in Glasgow. Yes. It's a very immoral place.
Yeah.
And so the Scots are going to lecture the Brits about what is going to be the moral authority of the Brits. Right?
Good point. Yeah.
Now, just for a second, let's talk for just 1 second about Islam. Okay. Because with Islam, you've got 3 documents there in Islam: the Quran, the Sunnah, and the Hadith. Right.
Right.
And some of these, the Hadith is much more violent than the Quran. The Quran has passages of violence in it, but so does the Bible. But the Hadith is much more, find a Jew behind the tree and kill him, is specified in the Hadith, which are supposedly the sayings of Muhammad. Now, you have to remember that Muhammad was illiterate, didn't read or write at all. And the Quran was actually written by Jewish scribes living in the area.
That's fascinating.
And many people will point to the Quran and say, well, the Quran has wickedness in it because it talks about Muhammad taking a 6-year-old wife. That's not as wicked as the Talmud, which allows the Levite priest to take a 3-year-old wife. Right? It's not as wicked as the Talmud. And so when you look at the Quran, we say, oh, the Quran this, the Quran that, the Quran the other thing. With Islam, when you're talking about people who are fundamentalist Islamic, at least there is a fear of what they believe to be God. And there is an approach towards reverence that's dictated by the Quran. Now, the Quran, in many respects, like, for instance, the very first book of the Quran, which is called the Cow, it's the longest surah in the Quran. And it says, what does it say? Moses was a prophet. Abraham was a prophet. Abraham is our father. It says Isa, the name that they use for Mashiach, Isa was born of a virgin, will come to judge the living and the dead. Okay? All of this is written in this book, the Cow, the very first, largest, longest surah in the Quran, the very first book. All this is written there. Then it goes on to say, time and time again that, God has no son. Allah has no son, has no son, right? But then you get in the middle of the book, he doesn't have any son, but he has 3 daughters. Well, we can't talk about that because this is what got Salman Rushdie to have a $1 million bounty on his head because he published a book called The Satanic Verses, quoting from the Quran. Okay. So the Quran, in my opinion, is a document that was given to cover people who were lost without a faith. Okay. And it was given like kind of a catch-all, if you will, a net into which people would fall when what? When the faith of Mashiach failed because people fell away from the faith because they were instructed in lawlessness.
Stephen, repeat that again, because that was quite loaded there and there was a lot to take in.
Well, Christianity failed. Look, when you look at the 7 churches in Revelation, where are those 7 churches? Turkey.
Right.
Modern day Turkey. They're in the Anatolian Peninsula. And by the way, those 7 churches, interestingly enough, are geographically laid out exactly as the Pleiades.
Really?
Did you know that?
No,
They
first
are a
time.
map of the Pleiades. Okay. So these 7 churches failed. All of them failed but the Church of Philadelphia. And what does Mashiach say in Revelation? If you don't do this, I will remove the lamp from you and place it elsewhere. So in all of those cases, the lamp was removed and placed elsewhere. And we could do a detailed discussion about those churches in Revelation and how they failed, tolerating Jezebel, engaging in practices, forgetting their first love, worshiping money, all of these things that happened that caused them to fail. And when Christianity failed, when the belief in the Mashiach failed because of their lawlessness, Islam came in and replaced it.
Mm.
What is Turkey now, if not Islamic, in those very same cities?
Yeah.
The city that was the very capital of Christianity, which was Constantinople and the Hagia Sophia, is now the Red Mosque. Why? Because of the failure of lawlessness. It had to do with the failure of lawlessness.
Mm.
We talk about this at Sefer Academy all the time. When you talk about the first and second commandment, you shall have no Elohim before me. That means that you cannot tolerate a second form of law. There's no diversity is our strength nonsense. That's absolute garbage. Singular faith, singular concept, singular law from a singular lawgiver, a singular judge, and a singular king, to whom this king that's going to rise here in the book of Acts owes an allegiance.
Mm.
Now, with that being said, if Charles III is going to be the one who is going to take this position, number one, he needs to be crowned at St. Paul's, not at Westminster. Premise number one, if he's not crowned at St. Paul's, he is not the king set forth in this prophecy.
Okay.
Because what does it say? And nations shall come up to worship on the mount that testifies to the patience and long suffering of the servant of Yahweh. What mount is it that testifies to that? Mount Lud, the top of Ludgate, St. Paul's in the city of London. That's what testifies to it.
Good point.
Okay. Now, all of these things are coming together now to what we can see in this prophecy. So if in fact Charles is planning on a coronation in Westminster Abbey, then we can rule him out. He's not this king that's going to do this, in which case this timing is wrong and so on and so forth. I don't see it happening. I think you're going to see the king is going to actually take the coronation at St. Paul's. And I think you're going to see that this king that is being appointed at this time in this year. And when we talk about this year, we're talking about March to March, right? We're not talking about January to January. In this year, that what will take place is if Charles III is Charles III, if he is going to rise up and do what he claims he's going to do, then he will be the peacemaker and he will overrule the parliament. He will overrule the parliament. He will overrule the foreign minister. He will overrule the prime minister and say, you are instructed on behalf of the people of the United Kingdom to seek peace in the singular authority of the United Kingdom, predicated upon our scriptural authority as the seat of the Messiah's faith. Because guess what? Britain is the seat of the Messiah's faith, because when Paul got to Mount Lud in 61 AD, Joseph of Arimathea had already been on the island for 3 decades. He'd already been here for three decades. The faith had already been established in Cornwall. The faith had already been established in Wales. It was already established. There were already kings of the lineage. In fact, Paul's appointee to the Bishop of Rome was a child of the faith from the line of Caractacus out of Wales, Caradoc. Direct relation to Bran the Blessed, who had married into the royal family. I mean, all of these things become very, very important aspects of why the Sefer says what the Sefer says. Okay. And we have to have some realization that when we talk, I, for one, believe that the hearts and minds of those most likely to accept and understand the faith as delineated in Sefer are Muslims. They're much more likely to accept the tenets of the faith than Christians are, because Christians are told we have Christian liberty. What's our Christian liberty? Well, initially it was to get divorced. But what is it now? To get an abortion. Our Christian liberty is divorce and abortion, which both tenets support fornication, which is now licensed. Fornication, divorce, and abortion, now licensed in the Christian church. And that fornication can take every aspect of deviancy. Genderism, homosexualism, on and on and on and on and on. It can take all of those forms because that's Christian liberty as defined by who? The Westcott and Hort forged text.
That's severe.
Now, look at Islam. Do you think Islam is going to say, oh, yeah, that's permitted under Islam?
No, not at all. They won't. Yeah.
Not at all. And so if you're going to come to a Muslim and say, this is the faith for you, and he's going to say, well, don't you guys engage in lawlessness? Unbridled lawlessness? Well, since the Westminster Confession, the answer is yes. So if you're going to have a marriage in Westminster Abbey, you're marrying to the Westminster Confession, which means you're marrying to this concept of lawlessness as carefully crafted by the Illuminati coming out of the Scottish Masonic Rite temples in the 1500s.
So deep. Very
These
deep.
things become very important points here, Jesse. Very, very important points. This prophecy is an extremely important prophecy. And I don't know how we arrived at this, but I'm gonna leave it here. That what needs to take place from here. I mean, let me just kind of go back and kind of spell it out, because under this theory here, right? In those days, there shall be wars and rumors of wars. And the king shall rise up, right? This is Acts 29, verse 12. And the king shall rise up, and his sword shall be for the healing of the nations, and his peacemaking shall abide. And the glory of his kingdom will become a wonder among the princes. His kingdom can only become a wonder among the princes with the restoration of the faith. And the restoration of the faith happens when this prophecy is fulfilled. The restoration of the faith that was brought to Britain. Look, go back, Charles. This is a message to Charles III. Go back and read the letter of Elizabeth I to the Pope. Go back and read that letter and know that this is the history of the British Isles, that the faith began with Joseph of Arimathea in Clandwit Major and in Cardiff in the place of the agreement. You who came through as the heir of the Prince of Wales, you who retains the red dragon on your crest, you were there in Cardiff. You were there in Caernarfon. You were there in those places. You know what I'm speaking of. And this faith that was brought into the nation by Joseph of Arimathea is the faith of the British people, the covenant man. British covenant man. The covenant man has a duty to the covenant. The covenant was given at Mount Horeb, face to face. Face to face, the people heard Yah speak. I am Yahweh Elohim. No other Elohim before me.
Yeah.
And if you assert this and you say, we as a people voted for the Brexit to leave the ascended son of the Fourth Reich. We left the ascended son of the Fourth Reich. We were the victors in World War II. And as a people of the common law and as a people of the common faith, we stand up now and rise out of the throes of the NATO chains, out of the throes of the Third Reich and its reconstruction in the EU, and we assert that the premises of the rightful kingdom of Yahweh, as found in the British Isles, the home of the covenant man. And by doing so, we abandon the trappings of war in Eastern Europe, and we bring forth and herald the time of peace in our time. Make peace, Charles. Make peace. Use your sword to make peace and restore Europe to prosperity and restore the UK to prosperity. Restore prosperity. Restore it.
One person was saying, can you put the letter? It's not the letter, it's Acts 29. So if you actually go, I'll quickly take you to the Sefer website, and there'll be blogs there, I believe, that will cover Acts 29 more. But it would be good, just before we move on to one of your research programs with Ross, if I share the screen so you could just talk us through the Sefer, because so many people want to know how best to use this, especially now that this becomes the focus of so much of the programs.
Sure.
Sorry, what did I do there? Share screen.
Well, while you're pulling that up, Jesse, let me just continue on in the book of Acts with what
Yeah,
is a
please.
controversial passage. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So in 29:13 it reads, "And it came to pass that certain of the Druids came unto Paul privately and showed him by their rites and ceremonies that they were descended from the Jews, the Yahudim, which had escaped from bondage, not escaped from bondage from Yahud, or the kingdom of Israel, or the kingdom of Judea, but rather who had escaped from bondage in the land of Mitzrayim. And the apostle believed these things and gave them the kiss of peace." Now, this becomes extremely important, because they're saying they showed Paul that we're descendants of the tribe of Judah. Well, they were descendants of the tribe of Judah because it was the house of Zarach. As I pointed out before, Galathus, who was a grandson of Zarach, remember that Zarach, so I'm going to go into this detail as we're talking here, Jesse.
Mm-hmm.
But when you read the birth of Zarach and Pharez, okay, these were the twins. They were the twins of Tamar. They came out of a relationship that was very tumultuous. Tamar had to seduce Judah, because Judah had pawned her off to marry his sons, and all of them had died. And so here she was with no husband. And so he went up to shear sheep, up in Las Vegas, and she went up and posed as a prostitute. And he paid for her services with his cloak and his robe and his ring. And she got pregnant, and not a little bit pregnant. She got pregnant with twins, and they were going to burn her. And she said, "Before you burn me, here's the father. Here's his cloak, here's his cape, and here's his cane, and here's his ring." And Judah said, "Fine, you're more righteous than I." And so he left her alone, and she gave birth to two children. Mm-hmm. One, the first child put his hand out, and they tied a red ribbon around his hand. And then the hand withdrew, and then the other child was born. So technically, Zarach was the firstborn, but Pharez had usurped it by coming out of the womb first. So Pharez now, Mashiach is in the line of Pharez. This is detailed very clearly in Matthew 1, that Mashiach comes in the line of Pharez. That is to say, Mashiach was a Pharisee by birth. But the house of Zarach, what happened to the house of Zarach? Well, the lineage is not well known, because it's only set forth in two places. One place in 1 Kings, which does not attribute the names to Zarach, and the other is in 1 Chronicles, where they do attribute the names to Zarach. Okay, so what you see is the sons of Zarach: Calcol, Darda, Haman, Etanim, and Zimri. Zimri was the only house that remained with Moshe. The other houses left. Calcol went and formed the city of Athens. Darda went and formed the city of Troy, commanding the Lydian people, the Lydian or Ludian people. He commanded them. Those Lydian people, once Troy was destroyed, moved, packed it, hook, flying, and sinker, and they moved to Mount Lud in a town they called Ludonium, the home of the Ludian or Lydian people, the sons of Shem. Okay? Okay, very important. Now, when you talk about Zarach, Zarach's son Calcol, his son Etanim would form the city of Cadiz in Spain. Calcol would form Athens, but Calcol had a son named Galathus. Galathus came back into Egypt. This is detailed, by the way, in the book of Jasher. Calcol came back into Egypt under the name Ai, and he led a band of people, more than 1 million people, and they decided to abandon Egypt. They left Egypt and traveled across through Libya, through Tunisia, through Morocco, into Portugal, where they built a port city, now Lisbon, but was known as Port of Gal, Port of Galetas, Portugal.
Mm.
And these people, the tribe of Galetas, became known as the Gauls in northern Spain, in Portugal, in western France, became known as the Gaelic people in Ireland and Scotland. So the Gaelic people and the Gaelic language is of this house of Judah. Remember, Judah was the father, Zerach was the son, Galetas was the grandson, the great grandson. Galetas brought his tribe into Ireland, into Brittany, into Scotland. Gaelic people. So they were most assuredly of the house of Judah through Zerach, through Galetas. And their practices were pre-Moshe. They did not participate in the Exodus. It says here that they were descended from the Yahudim, which escaped bondage in the land of Mitzrayim. They left before Moshe's Exodus, which means they were not given the Torah on the Mount. They were not given Moshe's Torah at all. So the practices they had were the practices consistent with the house of Israel before Moshe. And this is what the Druids pointed out to Paul. Now, what the Druids didn't tell him was that at the same time, there were Celtic people who had come from Central Europe and were known in the British Isles as the Kuldees or Chuldees, and they were influencing the practices of the Druids. Oh, no, you do it this way. Oh, no, you do it that way. Oh, no, you do it this way. Oh, no, you do it that way. But the Druids at the time, when Paul came there, said, we are descended from the Yahudim. These are our rites. These are our rituals. Are they consistent with what you know to be the case of the Yahudim? And Paul said, yes, they are. This is what is found right here in this book of Acts, right? Now, the Druids that we know today is a bunch of goblin New Age garbage that got completely converted when? In the 19th century. Now, all of a sudden, tree-hugging, wreath-wearing, toga-wearing, pseudo-Romans.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. Yeah, when did this change take place? Because that's the Druids that we in this modern age would associate to, and the evil that even all the way back to when Queen Elizabeth, a young Queen Elizabeth, was coronated by them in the ceremony. I know we played that video once at the very beginning, and that was my Druids.
Yeah, there were Druids that were, you go back to the Druids before that. There's a statue of a Druid fellow. And I don't know if it's in Merthyr or if it's in Pontypridd or one of those towns in Wales, but they have a statue of this Druid who brought cremation into Britain. He was the one that eventually talked Parliament into authorizing cremation. But the Druid practice that emerged in the 19th century was completely different, totally different than the Druids that had been extinguished in the 5th century by the Romans on the island of Anglesey out at Holyhead. That was the last bastion of the Druids. And the Romans finally crossed over and were able to extinguish Druidism in the 5th century. So you have 13 centuries of no Druidism at all, right? And then all of a sudden it emerges with a lot of Aleister Crowley trappings.
Yeah.
Yeah, hogwash. Anyway, that's another story.
Yeah, do you know what? Again, the chronology that you give, you always take the program in a different direction. I'll study in one way and you go completely the opposite way, and then you're just giving us so much. But actually today, you've given a foundation for so many questions. It's building blocks. We have to go back. It's really hard to take in everything that you said. Where it's a factor of time for you, I know, but to be able to put this all down so that it could at least be within your resources, within the Sefer, because there's so much there to say, and it really does give that foundation to the questions, to the loopholes that we're discovering. And now, at least when we go back and read Acts chapter 29 this time round, we'll have a better understanding and foundation to build on. But it's quite a quest to understand that, isn't it, in itself?
It truly is. And in fact, one person who read Acts 29, it inspired her so greatly, she wrote a book on the journeys of Paul. Yeah, that she went back and started researching it, and she ended up writing a book on the journeys of Paul. And
do you know the author's name?
I think she goes by Mary James, but I'm not sure. And the book might be on Amazon. We were going to print the book, but we kind of got into a misunderstanding. But
Yeah.
But at any rate, she was completely influenced by Acts 29. She has since
Mm.
corroborated every aspect of Acts
Mm.
29, by the way, and more and
Yeah.
more.
Mm.
And so at any rate, so we see here that I mean, the point I'm making is that when we talk about the work that Ross and I were doing,
Mm.
this goes back to again Ross's continual claim that the faith was founded in Wales, and
Mm.
that in fact the island of Avalon is this area that is now the gardens called the Sophia Gardens, which is
Mhm.
directly behind Cardiff Castle. Now, you didn't get a chance to see it when we were in Cardiff, but you know,
No.
you have this huge castle that was built by the Windsors,
Mm.
which is this massive edifice. That isn't the true Cardiff Castle. You have to go inside that castle to see the little castle that was
Right.
built up on the mound there. That's the true Cardiff Castle.
Mm.
And that Cardiff Castle sat there on that mound, and it sat there on a mound that was an island. And you had the River Tuff on this side and the River Tuff on that side. But the
Mm.
River Tuff on that side has since been filled in, and there's no river there anymore. I think there is some evidence of the river, but the river's
Yeah.
gone.
Mm.
And that created an island, and this island was called the island of Avalon.
Oh, I see.
And I believe there were 12 hides of land given to Joseph of Arimathea and his 11 disciples, and they were given there on that side of the Sevens.
Mm.
Because the other side of the Sevens, you know, Somerset, which was all swamp, Reed
Mhm.
Sea. The other side of the Sevens, which is where the tin mines were in Cornwall, this was a completely different area. And this is the place where probably Mashiach did, in fact, walk and did those feet in ancient time, walk upon Britain's mountains green. Yeah, he probably walked in Cornwall, is
Mm.
probably where he walked. And if he did build a house here, which is one of the legends, he probably built it in Cornwall. He did not build it in Glastonbury. I can tell you that. He did not build it in Glastonbury. And
Mm.
so, you know, so as a consequence, we see here that the artifacts that we were seeking and looking at in ancient Wales, when we were down, you remember we went to Llanwit Major, right?
Yeah. Mm.
Okay, so Llanwit Major was an extremely important point. We didn't get a chance to go to the church in the round of
Mm.
Illid,
Yeah.
of St. Illid. Now, Illid, I believe, is actually from Luke 3, the father
Mm.
of Joseph, the husband of Mary. And
Right.
Illid, yeah, and his name actually was Eli. In
Mm.
most texts, it's Haley, Heli, or
Yeah.
Heli, but that wasn't his name. His name was Eli. And
Ailey.
so
Yeah.
we realized his name was Eli. And what was Mashiach saying from the cross? Eli, Eli, why have you forsaken me?
Forsaken me. Mm.
Why aren't you here, Eli? I mean, Joseph, his father, was already his, supposed father was already dead. He's nowhere to be seen in the stories of the Gospels. He's just not there. What about Eli, the grandfather? Well, this Mashiach is calling for him. Eli, Eli, where are you? Why aren't you here? And this called Eli into a very pronounced faith, and he would travel with Joseph of Arimathea along with Shimon the Zealot. Remember that Simon the Zealot was probably the father of Judas Iscariot.
Right.
Okay, so the record shows that Simon the Zealot was executed in Britain. He died a martyr in Britain. Eli died in Britain, but he was known as Illid, Saint Illid, a founder of a church in Llanwit Major in the first century around 37 AD.
Mm.
But you have to remember the practices of the faith at that time were not building buildings, putting up statues of
No.
Mary, a big
Yeah.
Roman cross on top of it.
Mm.
The practice of the church then was to meet in the round for round dancing. Now, how do we know this? Because in the passage that delineates the sons of Zarach in First Kings, it doesn't tell you they're the sons of Zarach. It tells you in the King James that they're the sons of Mahol.
Mm.
Well, Mahol is not a proper noun. Mahol means they were the sons from round dancing.
Round dancing.
Round dancing. Okay, now this is something when we do the conference next year, Jesse, which I believe we're going to do in April. I'm believing on that. Yeah, is going to schedule us
In
then,
Cornwall, in the amphitheater.
Yeah, at
Another
Minnick.
committee.
Yeah, and guess what? That's a theater in the round, and we will have round dancing. We will have round dancing, and this is an appropriate means of meeting. To meet in an outdoor amphitheater, which is how they met.
Mm.
This is how the faith began. They met in an outdoor amphitheater. It was done with no building, no spire, no vaulted ceilings, no stained glass, no statues, none of this, no altars. It was people met
Very good
and they
point.
did primarily praise and worship and some teaching of a person standing in the middle of those who were round dancing.
Is that okay?
Okay.
Yeah.
And the
Okay.
round dancing is not pagan dancing, it's worshipful dancing.
Yeah.
It's worship. I don't know if you've ever seen Davidic dancing.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's Davidic dancing. I have. Yeah. Not
It's
in
Davidic.
person, but yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is something that is part of the faith. It's part of the faith, part of the trappings of the faith. And hopefully we are going to be there for Pesach, and we will be there with the bread and the cup, and we will be there for all of matzah. And of course, this particular feast begins on the evening of the 4th of April. The 4th of April, which means that we have to fly in on the 2nd. And it also means that there's going to be an early Shabbat. So the first Shabbat, the Mian Sabbaton, if you will, in the Greek, the first Shabbat will be during that week. So what does that mean? That means that we will also be doing the first fruits offering. So all three of the spring feasts, Pesach, Matzah, and the first fruits, and the first Sabbath will all be contained in that 7-day period of time. It will all be in that 7-day period of time.
Yeah.
So it's going to be absolutely phenomenal. So whatever you do, don't book my vacation Verbo that I'm booking first. You got to, of course, it's an ideal time to, possibly bring. I don't know what the camping situation is like that down there, but it might be pretty good. But it is in early April, and it's going to precede the coronation by a month.
Well, that's true. Yeah, I only found out from Stuart posting that today when the exact date was. Yeah. Well, it would be good to have that camping ability for those who are able to do that. We need to get planning with that. And actually, wow. Again, you just brought so much here to consider and to take in. One of the speakers, Malcolm, he's going to be joining us next Friday. And I think you've had some discussion more than me today with him. The last time I spoke, it was going to be on the lost books, but you started to discuss Acts 29, I think. So do you think you'll be going in that direction on Friday?
Well, we're going to be talking about the lost books, and in particular, we're going to be talking about Enoch. I mean, again, stuff is evolving. Stuff is evolving, Jesse, that, I don't know what to tell you, that there is stuff that is coming out of Scripture right now that is really quite incredible that we're finding. And of course, to have a brother like Malcolm involved in this research is really incredible, just as it was incredible to have Ross involved with us, because Ross brought so much hard archaeology to the table. And this hard archaeology, I can't begin to tell you how important this hard archaeology is, Jesse. The work that we did in Magram, the work that we did at Clanwick Major and other places, this hard archaeology is incredibly important, and it's incredibly important to the crown right now and incredibly important to the British people, right? This is, you have to remember that the faith began here in Britain 300 years before it began in Rome. 300 years before it began in Rome. It was alive in Britain. That the practice was actual, true practice. It wasn't corrupted by somebody who had a bone to pick to exalt Rome as the eternal city. It instead was a practice in its pure sense, a pure sense that brought the gospel by word of mouth. That was a practice where the brothers and sisters were meeting in their homes, and meeting in open air spaces to praise and worship and to sing. And to sing a new song. I mean, all of these things that were common to the faith at that time, overruled by a giant building, overruled by a statue, overruled by the exaltation of somebody in a fish head hat. Yeah,
it's true. It's very true. I was reading in the drama of the Lost Disciples, just in the intro, but what you were saying is described here very well by Edmund Burke, who writes, "People will not forward to posterity who never look backwards to their ancestors." And that's everything that you were saying there, really. You've got to appreciate and understand that. And what you're saying, Stephen, is so new, so much new narrative, new history, things that haven't been thought. So do you understand it's going to take a lot to take this in and to to just to understand it, let alone and how it all fits in, because it's nothing that a lot is not what we're used to hearing. We never got taught this at the school level, secondary level, higher level. You know, even when I was doing the degree that I was doing, it was presented in a certain way, not like this. So, you know, you never hear these things at all.
There will be a quiz here, Jesse. There will be a quiz here in just a few minutes.
Oh, gosh.
Easy.
You have to get everyone
I
to
know it's a lot. I know it's a lot, but I'm going to leave it at that, Jesse. I think with the words that we've spoken here today are important. And I think, I don't know if Charles is going to hear about this, but I think he should. I think it's very important. And I think that, you know, I mean, all of this, who knows? I mean, I don't know how this is going to go, but I do know that we as the remnant are called into a faith in a particular way.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to practice that faith. And with Yah's blessing, we will be back in Britain in April.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we need to.
So let's leave it there, Jesse, and then we'll come back and pick this up later. Okay.
Okay. All right. So shall we go to one of the videos then, or what do you want to do first? Go to Sefer and explain the website, or go straight to one of your research videos with Ross?
Let's go ahead and run the video if you want. Sure.
Okay. Let me just. I've got several here. Let me just check which one's going to be. 1, 2. Okay, I'm going to put this one on.
Yeah, it's slightly different, isn't it? It's not the usual knots there, is it?
Is because it's only a 2-line weave instead of a 3-line weave.
And it's like a plait, isn't it, the style?
Almost all of the Trinitarian expression, which they're trying to do a Trinitarian expression down here. You know, you have this one, and then there's a third one here, and then the third one here is wrapping up. So this is an expression of eternal life, if you will. So you have the Father and the Son, and then the Holy Spirit is winding up here to create this expression. Or maybe this is the Holy Spirit and the Father, and this is the Mashiach.
Oh, you see him reading from the bottom up, yeah?
They're winding in this expression, winding up onto the cross to show the ultimate ascension. Now, in all of this, you know, when we see this cross, this one here is obviously missing the top that had the circle in it. When you talk about that being the Ouroboros, you know, with the snake swallowing its tail, there's a very interesting passage, troubling passage in the Gospels that say, as the serpent was lifted up in the wilderness, so the Son of Man must be lifted up. Troubling passage. But that passage is explained by the apocryphal book, The Wisdom of Solomon, in chapter 16, which says, this is significant of not the Son of Man being the serpent, but rather that the Savior has always been Yah. We're looking at it.
Very good.
So that was a really short one there, but I found that quite interesting, actually. It's when you went to the Margam Abbey Museum. And
yeah, that's very interesting. You know, again, we see this idea of the Celtic cross.
Yeah.
Right? The Celtic cross and the Celtic symbolism. And the Celtic symbolism, you know, drawing this idea of the Trinity and this idea of the three intertwined triangles, if you will. It's very much it's a quite common art form that you find even today in Celtic jewelry in Ireland and Scotland.
Yes, totally popular. Yeah.
Very common. And this indication of this idea of the Trinity. And in this case, they wind it up. And of course, with the cross, with the circle behind it, you've got a number of things. It could be the Ouroboros, the snake. I've seen that. But then again, the snake is oftentimes, I think, a depiction that is incorrect. I think what they're trying to put back there is a halo, the halo of holiness behind the cross, right?
Oh, I see.
And this halo of holiness, which with the Celtic wrapping, is the Holy Spirit and Mashiach wrapped around this idea of the Roman cross. Right? And it's funny because it's not a Roman cross. This is conspicuously a Celtic cross. And you see evidence of it in Wales. You see evidence of it in Ireland. All the graveyards in Ireland are full of it. And so are the graveyards in Scotland. Evidence this Celtic cross, right? And it's really not a Celtic cross. It's more of a Gaelic cross. But we'll call it Celtic for today's purposes, since that's the artwork that's there.
Yeah.
Now, if you want to go to the Sefer website, we can take a look at that for a second.
Yeah. I'm sharing it, or are you?
If you would.
Okay. So this is Dr. Pidgeon's Sefer website here. Actually, you'd be probably better to navigate me how you want to introduce this. I did want to play this video again once you finish, because people can actually understand. It capsulizes everything about the Sefer.
Yeah. Now on the website here, and I thank you for bringing this up, Jesse. You know, when you look in here, if you go to this resources tab, if you would click on the resources tab. Now you can see here we have the weekly Torah portion, we have daily prayers, we have the blog. Let's go into the blog real quickly. Go into the blog site. Now you'll see in the blogs, you can see my most recent blog, the Book of Enoch, Watchers and the Commentary. And we have the common subjection to the faith. That also is accompanied with a video. And then we go down through these blogs, and you can see how much I have written on. When you ask about the blogs, just keep scrolling. You'll see what the things that I have written in these blogs.
We're at 2018 so far. 2017. So this is a long catalogue. Oh, it's exhaustive. 2013 on the Aleph tab, your first one.
So this goes all the way back. Now let's go back up to resources again. And let's go to Dr. P's videos. Now, for those of you that are interested, now scroll down here, you will see that this video over here, the prophetic timeline, this is one of the videos that was taken down by YouTube. And that video is here and complete right here on the site. And if you scroll down, you'll see all the videos that are available here on the site.
Yeah. So this is what you would normally do on YouTube, but this is your backup now also.
Yeah, we now have it here in case we get kicked out of YouTube. We now have this available here, so that these are all here now. Ultimately, we're going to put in the crossing over videos as well. The crossing over videos will show up here. Now, click on the sickle here for a second, Jesse. Now, when you click on one of these videos, you'll see that. Go ahead and scroll down.
So the weather, my signal's becoming a little bit slow.
Okay. So you can see that here. You'll see. Scroll up a little bit. So here you see. Here's the video now, which you can watch. Now scroll down just a little bit. Now you see. Download the slideshow here. That's the PowerPoint.
Okay.
And download the transcript here. Okay.
Fantastic.
So we have and of course the transcript is now laid out right here. So you can see that we have these resources are here. Thank you, Facebook user. Thank you. I don't know who's saying that, but thank you for saying that. You can see that we have the transcript, we have the PowerPoint, and we have the video all lodged on the Sefer site.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's a great resource. The blog's another great resource. Let's continue. Go to resources again. Now go down to free download. Oh, go to Sefer Radio. Let's go to Sefer Radio. Now, when you go to Sefer Radio, if you scroll down here, you'll see that we have all of the podcasts are here available, right? That you can go to any one of those sites and you can find. Let's click on this anchor.fm here, the lit up.
Yeah.
No, not there. The one above it.
Sorry.
Okay, that's all right. That's all right. Let's see what we get here. Just a minute. Let's see what comes up. Okay, there we go. Sefer Radio. Okay, now scroll down here, and you'll see. Oh, this is having a little bit of a hard time loading. But
I think it's just our weather here.
There you go. And you'll see that we have an absolute ton of recordings, including we have the latest Sabbath meeting, and this should be showing much more on the page because there's actually there is a boatload, an absolute boatload of audio on Sefer Radio.
It might just be that this is the UK region. So dependent on a region, there is more available. It could possibly be that.
Yeah, scroll down to the bottom of the page there for just a second. I'm surprised it doesn't say, oh, click on the privacy policy over here.
It's here.
Yeah, let's just click out of that. Okay. Yeah, there should be a lot more. I mean, the Sabbath meetings go way, way back.
Yeah, they do.
I'm surprised they don't show more. There should be plenty. But at any rate, so you can see that Sefer Radio is completely loaded. And you can catch it on all these different platforms. You can catch the Sabbath meetings, and there's also audio recordings of all the videos that are available on there as well.
Mm. Okay, that's good.
Okay.
That's very good to know. Okay.
All right. And then let's go back to the Sefer. Now, if you and let's again tap on resources there.
Mm-hmm.
And look, you can look here at the Italian blog.
You want me to go in it?
Sure. Now, this is the work of my beloved friends, Pietro and Monica and Esther, who have translated these blogs into Italiano.
Wow.
Okay.
That's
Lo
fantastic.
spirito dell'incredulità. Chi è adesso Levi, right? Who is Levi, right? And there's older posts. They have a
Yeah,
number
yeah.
of the blogs written in Italian.
It's
Okay.
wonderful.
Okay, now let's go back up. And if you look up here on the right here, Jesse, you go up to resources again.
Mm-hmm.
Scroll to the right over here to Espanol. Well, before we do, go down all the way to the bottom. Let's go to free downloads. No, not there. Go to resources. Go back up to resources.
Sorry. Yeah.
And then, go to free downloads. There you go. Now, on free downloads, now check out some of the stuff that we have here. Scripture comparison chart, sacred names, a Hebrew alphabet chart, the Sefer reading tracker, so you can keep track if you're going to read the whole Sefer, the Sefer key, the chart of the common names and places, the 2022 feast dates, 2023 feast dates, the calendar, understanding the Hebrew calendar, which is the preface to the Yom Kodesh, understanding the sacrifices and feasts of Yahweh, which is an appendix to the Yom Kodesh, the Haggadah for Pesach, which we have in a written guide, and we also have a video guide. If you have no one to keep Pesach with, we have a video for you. Then we have Mashiach's prayer in Hebrew, the 10 Devarim, the Shema in Hebrew and English, the maps that are found in the back of the Sefer, the index tab instruction guide, which you need if you're going to put on the tabs yourself.
I wouldn't try.
The praise and supplication music CD, right?
Ah.
That's all here. I mean, it's a free download, right? Sefer HaYashar. This is now the Sefer HaYashar. This is the book of Jasher in Hebrew. Okay. So if you want the book of Jasher in Hebrew, it's right here, the Sefer HaYashar. Then here is the missing fragment, the 70 restored verses in Ezra, which were missing out of editions 1 and 2 in the Sefer. We now have it downloaded.
Oh, wow.
Additional Psalms, 151 to 155. Psalm 91 translation. Rishon Kortin, the first 13, Corinthians 13 translation. And the Sefer of the prophet Yechezkel in restored order. Now click on that one, this prophet of Yechezkel in restored order. Now, this is the true order of the book of Ezekiel, and we have it in a PDF form. Now, if you look, you'll see here that Sefer Rishon, okay, this is the first book, okay? Now, I have the old citation, chapter 8, okay? Chapter 8, verse 1. Then I have the old citations, 8:7, right? 9:1, 9:2. You see in the block parentheses in here? Do you see inside, Jesse?
Here.
Do you see where it says like 13, 14 here? You see?
Yes, I do. Okay, got it. Yeah.
That's original citation. That's where you originally find the verse.
Yeah.
But now this book, so I have the original citations contained in there, but book is in order, in its actual true order. Okay,
That would have been hard work. Wow.
oh yeah, it was a lot of work, but this is a free download. So if somebody wants a copy of this, you can just, download it and print it, and then away you go. You have Ezekiel in its true order, just like that.
Yeah.
Okay. So these are some of the things that we have on the website. All right, let's click out of here and go back into the website.
So okay, let me come out of that actually. Okay, yeah.
Okay,
So this missing fragment, the next time you print the Sefer after the Millennium Edition, you would include these type of things?
They are included.
They're included already.
Yeah, they just weren't in Sefer 1 and 2.
Right.
Okay, now go back up to resources there
Mm-hmm.
and scroll over to the right and go all the way over to Espanol. To the right. Keep going to the right.
Oh, right, yeah.
Now click on Espanol. Okay. Now, when you click on Espanol, you're going to see the Sefer comes up. Una restauración integral de las escrituras sagradas en el idioma español. So here we are. La primera edición ya está disponible. La palabra et se compone de las letras hebreas alef y tav, que son la primera y la última letra del alfabeto. Alfabet hebreo, la palabra sefer significa rolo. Libro o también una escritura numerada, por lo tanto, el et sefer es una escritura numerada desde lo primero hasta lo último, desde el principio hasta el final. So what we see here is we have this website now is a great deal of the Sefer website. Now, this video here is really quite, click on the play button on this video.
Have you translated it? Wow.
Yeah, but watch this. Watch this. Oh, yeah, here we go, right? Respuestas. And so this is now giving you this video in Espanol, okay? And so you can see that we have there's a tremendous amount of Spanish resources on the website. You simply click on Espanol and you will get a tremendous group of publicación más reciente, right? And so you can see that, and then if you look up at the top, you see how we have inicio, tienda, app móvil, conocernos, recursos, distribuidores, contactos, and inglés. See, all these tabs up above, right, that allow a Spanish speaker to get around on this with no difficulty.
Wow, it's full. That's really good.
Okay.
Very good. Yeah.
So and of course the Et Sefer over here, this is the Spanish edition of the Sefer, right? That's the Spanish edition.
Yeah.
And so we now have we put some books in Guatemala, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the young men who's a young pastor, he got a hold of the book, and he won't let anybody touch it now. It's like, no, you can't look at it, you can't touch it. Keep your hands off of it. Mine. It's like, okay, brothers. Okay. Anyway, so this is the work of Sefer Publishing. This is the work, invested really. We just keep pouring money back into the company, build the company more and more and more, that we can reach more and more people with what we're doing. Okay.
Wow.
Okay, so I'm going to leave it at that, Jesse. So that's the Sefer website.
Yeah, let me stop sharing. That is great. In fact, let me just, because it's only a few minutes long, because this sets the precedent for all our Fridays going forward. It just explains for all those who are new in English what the Sefer is.
Have you got the volume on that? We're not getting any volume on that, Jesse.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm going to answer a question here that Kevin Cockle asks. He says, where does the book collection fit in and how much credibility? I can tell you, Kevin, when Malcolm and I talk about this, we're going to be talking about this next week, and we'll talk about the credibility. Depending on, like the writings on Adam and Hua, those are actually later writings. They're very interesting, but they're later writings. They're like 3rd century writings. But many of the books in Bereshith are not. They're part of the 70 that was reserved. Like the Testament of the 12 Patriarchs, for instance, is a reserved text. Joseph of Arimathea is a reserved text. The Ascension of Isaiah is a reserved text. 2nd and 3rd Baruch are reserved texts. These things were texts that were actually found in the collection inside the library that Rome went out of the way to burn. And so, but let's wait on that question if we can, Kevin, until next week when Malcolm's with us, and we can talk more specifically about these books, right? And again, like we've delineated these books outside the cover of the Sefer, and we've done that for a reason. Bereshith is a great book. Havot is another one that is just absolutely smoking in terms of the extra scriptural writing. And but like I say, we'll detail that next week. We're going to spend a lot more time detailing those works and what they were all about, and particularly the writing that appears in the book of 4th Ezra, telling us what Ezra did in terms of which writings he secreted, which ones he didn't. Okay. So thanks for that question, Kevin. A great question.
And I do apologize. It seems like there was no sound, but I had sound coming through my computer. So I didn't realize some people may not be having sound. Did you hear anything, Stephen?
I did not.
Oh, what a pity. Such a good ad. Please go to the Sefer.
When you go to share that, Jesse, when you go to share the audio, now I'm going to give you an example. So I'm going to share a screen here, and I'm going to share a screen with
I forgot. Yeah.
Let's get Messianic dancers. Okay, now there's a share tab audio. When you go to share tab, you look down at the bottom, in the left-hand corner, it says share tab audio. You have to click that on. Okay.
Yeah, you're not sharing screen now, are you? But I know what you mean. I forgot to do it.
Here we go. This is
playing?
Yeah, we can hear it now. This is Messianic dancing. I'm not quite sure where this was filmed. Probably in Mark Biltz's church. So that gives you some idea, Jesse.
Yeah.
We'll take a look, and I can show you when you get into a little bit more vibrant dancing, they kind of get with it here. Here, let's share this one. Let's see if we can get this one going. Whoop.
Hear it. Not see.
Yeah, let me see if I can. Everybody likes to dance to Paul Wilbur, I guess.
Do we we know that he's not necessarily messianic, is he? He goes to both. I know that name. Did you say Paul Wilbur?
Yeah, Paul Wilbur, yeah. So you can see, it's just some examples of.
I haven't got control over this one. Great.
Yeah, it's just some examples, Jesse, of dancing, right?
Yeah.
Dancing. I mean, if you saw the herds that I have seen doing this, I mean,
Yes.
I have seen. Let me see if I can put in Davidic dancing.
I've seen it once. A viewer here that I've known for a very long time, Rose Wilson. She does Davidic dancing. She's 81, 82 now, so she probably stopped, but she was doing it from the earliest times that I've known her. So that's my experience of it.
Yeah, and so it is. It's a very interesting practice, I think, but it is consistent with Scripture. David danced before Yah.
Yeah.
And his wife got very embarrassed about him doing it. But the fact is that he danced before Yah. That's a very common. It's very something that is important in the true practice, because it's ironic that you go to these congregations and they're all engaged in midrash, beating each other up over the calendar, whether or not the earth is flat, on and on and on, pounding their fist, and then the music breaks out and they're all dancing in unison. Okay, hallelujah. Okay. All right. So with that, I'm going to leave it there, and I'll try to get a different example for us later. Okay.
Yeah, no, look, thank you so much. We really thank you for joining us today, Dr. Pidgeon. Thank you. You set the foundations as we start off in the Lost Hidden book, starting off with Enoch. I'm really excited about that, and really delving into that from a Sefer perspective, but wider, just understanding Enoch as well. People have been waiting so long for this, so there's a lot of research and homework. You know your stuff better than myself, but I'm looking forward to journey with you. So come back on Friday. You will be meeting Malcolm, who is based here in the United Kingdom, and we'll give you more of an introduction then. But for now, you take care. It's always great to be with you. Stay blessed, and we'll see you soon. Thank you, Dr. Pidgeon. Take care.
Jesse.
Bye.
2, 3, and. Kadosh, Kadosh, Echad Yisrael, Baruch